At the beginning of the message, what are we waiting for? I would like to honor the Super Diva. Somebody posted on Facebook, all I want for Christmas is for Ruth Bader Ginsburg to have eternal life on this planet. So I encourage you to just take a moment to offer her healing and grace to her and to those who love her. So she is a woman of possibilities. She is a woman of incredible potential. She is a woman of hope and, in incredible ways, a very peaceful, beautiful, gentle spirit. So she resonates with all four of our candles of hope and potential and possibilities and peace. Peace, though, seems to me to be an elusive dream for our own personal lives internally and for the lives of those around us, for our globe. After all, the individual that we embrace as a teacher, Jesus says, there will be wars and there will be rumors of war throughout our entire lifetime and his lifetime and all of our lifetimes. And the prophet Jeremiah boldly reminds us, they have treated the wound of my people carelessly, saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. So much for Christmas cheer, Pastor James. Merry Christmas to you too. Gandhi tells us there is no road towards peace. Peace is the road. So I'm sure you've heard this many times. It's always darkest before the dawn, right? It's always darkest before the dawn. On the one hand, I get very annoyed by people who say and use this phrase to cheer somebody up or to cheer me up when I'm down. When somebody's down on their luck and they have no hope, to say, well, it's always darkest before the dawn. My question, though, is it almost dawn? Is there something new on the horizon? Is there a light coming into our darkness even this very moment, this very day? I know many have said that this is one of the darkest times in American history. I think if you look back on our history, oh, it's certainly not the darkest. And potentially some say this is a really dark time in the history of the church because churches are no longer full and prospering and they're closing their doors. We may say, even for some of us who are really justice-seeking and love-seeking, that maybe this is a dark night of our souls, of our existence. The dark night of the soul is when you've lost the flavor of life. The dark night of the soul is when you've lost the flavor of life, but have not yet gained the fullness of divinity. So it is that we must weather that dark time, which is a period of transformation. I agree, I disagree. I think most of us, if we're willing, we can see some pretty amazing awarenesses of divinity and of the divine and of the human spirit in times like this. This is a time for opening our eyes, opening our hearts, when we're seeing the ugly underbelly of our capitalistic greed and consumer-driven and where it's gotten us, separated, divided from one another, disconnected from God, disconnected from the other. So I think during these times, it's a wake-up call, and a wake-up call for those of us who think we are enlightened and living in the light, just as much as it is for those who may be living in the dark. And I don't necessarily like those terms because I think they say something about race and racism, but it's the words of Isaiah. This, to me, is the comfort amid challenging times. Challenges are gifts that force us to search for a new center of gravity. Don't fight them. Just find a new way to stand. Thank you, Oprah. Once again, you've said marvelous things. So that's kind of my introduction to this text from Isaiah, and I commented on how I could sense the energy in the room changing as we read those words. And as you read those words about the boots and the blood, and then suddenly it was, but here is a mighty counselor, a God who will raise up and rise up in the kingdom. So there's a rather funny cartoon that I found this week. He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. We're going to need a larger birth certificate, Mary. So Isaiah penned these incredibly familiar words at a time when things were incredibly bad, just about as bad as they could be, for those in the southern kingdom or the kingdom of Judah. It was some of their darkest hours. Although the Jewish people, we know, have had many dark hours. So the northern kingdom, Israel, and the southern kingdom, Judah, they were fighting each other. This was not anti-Semitism. This was Jew against Jew and Hebrew against Hebrew. Oh, the north against the south. The northern kingdom, Israel, was plotting with Syria to invade the southern kingdom and take over the southern kingdom. But this plan was averted because suddenly the northern kingdom was invaded by the Assyrians. Land was lost, power was given up, oppression began, and the Assyrian king had planned also then to invade Judah, the southern kingdom. And this Assyrian king, like many of our politicians today, was a tyrant, was violent, didn't really seem to care about anybody except his own skin and his own bank account and coffers. And this, of course, this beautiful verse is the one that we find in Handel's Messiah, but so few of us know what comes before that. The bloodshed, the war, the oppression. But it's so much more than just a beautiful score. It's historically about a corporate, communal sense of darkness. It's about a society of sin, a national tragedy, and corrupt political and social infrastructures. So most of you know that we had another 60 friends from Guatemala that arrived on Thursday afternoon. They crossed a border that they believed would bring them hope for a new life, would bring them peace rather than the violence they were experiencing on the streets of Guatemala. They thought crossing this border would bring them abundance rather than the scarcity they were living in, only to find now that they were plunged into an incredibly broken system that offers little hope, little peace, little abundance. But what our little community did is we offered them room in the inn. We gave them cots and blankets, food and clothing, smiles and hugs, bad Spanish, and really great Spanish from our translators and interpreters. We gave them our new showers and said, christen them. And many expressed for 12 days they had not had a shower as they were on the border in holding cells. And as they were present with us, you could see their hope, the possibilities begin to surface again. And Mike and Brian, I think, Brian, are you just here? Mike is teaching. Mike and Brian, you opened your inn, and these are the two kids and the parents we did not want to put on the screen just for safety and security. These are the kids that you opened your inn to, offering love, offering hope, offering a respite of peace, a gift And we do not know the difference that we make in the lives of those individuals, even for a night or two or three. And what we do know is that we love people in the middle of their pain and their disappointment and their dashed expectations and the cruel treatment that they received at our borders. And it reminds me of this beautiful verse from Romans 5:8. I loved you at your darkest. That's really the call of the people of God. That's the call of humanity. Are we changing our world by receiving these immigrants? Are we bringing world peace by the work that we do in the world, by the next march that we will participate in? Will the broken immigration be fixed because we made room in our little church for 60 refugees and Mike and Brian in their home and others who receive them into their homes? No. To be really honest, no. But we touched lives. We shared out of our humanness and out of as much divinity as we could muster up. We shared in our homes, and at least for a moment in this holiday season, light and love were alive. And light and love were alive, and darkness and hatred were banished. Bit by bit, person by person. I find it strange that we've lived on this globe for hundreds of thousands of years as an evolving humanity, and yet we're still as barbaric as ever. We hear those words of Isaiah penned many, many moons ago, and we know there are words today on the battlefields. We think we must meet power with power. The oppressed, strangely enough, when they get the power, they begin to oppress. Narcissism, and we continue to idolize the rich and the powerful. It seems that the rich and the powerful and the most assertive are the ones that, end up in magazines or pop culture websites. Angelina and Brad seem to be more important than some of the real news out there in the world. It's always darkest before dawn. It's always darkest before dawn. Into the darkness of Israel and Judah, into the national chaos and despair, Isaiah's words shine a light that illuminates the shape and the form of Isaiah's central claim of his good news. And Isaiah's good news is simply this: rescue is coming. To those who sit in darkness and fear and anxiety and unfulfilled dreams, rescue is coming. Imagine the moment after a battle when terrifying noises of screaming planes and whining missiles and grenade blasts suddenly stop, come to an end. I have a great uncle who was living in London during what was called the Blitz, the bombing of London in Great Britain that began September 7th, 1940, and happened for 57 consecutive nights. And this uncle, Charles William Pennington, would explain to me, he'd say, I remember that moment that everything went silent. And he said we had not heard silence for 57 days. And they continued to live in fear of a reprise, right? That the bombing would begin over and over and over again, and yet it did not. And they actually forgot what silence was like. He said when the smoke cleared and the dust settled and the sun reappeared, he said he would touch his own body and touch the body of his wife and his children and find out, yeah, we're still here, we're still whole, we're still present, and we made it through it. I believe that's the message there in Isaiah. The prophet carries each of us from darkness into the light, from despair to hope, from terror to comfort in just a matter of seconds. The prophet heralds the dawning of light because there's always that little flicker of light within our humanity and our divinity. And in the flicker of this hopeful light, Isaiah says, the people are celebrating as if they have won the battle. And then he says their yoke is thrown off. The oppressive rod is broken. And then this beautiful imagery that the instruments of war are being thrown into the fire. Can you imagine that day? And the prophet uses these beautiful images to usher in the birth of a star child. And what it means for people who are experiencing hopelessness and degradation. So what emotions do these images evoke for you? What experiences do they recall? Where do you see the light dawning? Where do you see light dawning? Where do you see the rods of oppression being broken? And what is being thrown into the fire? If we're honest, the rods of oppression, they seem relatively unbreakable, made of titanium. The boots and weapons of war seem to always be fueling one fire after the next in the destruction of war. In fact, the military complex and industry just seems to keep expanding and growing, and now it's going to expand and grow into outer space. And to be honest, as I read through this prophecy, its power resonates with me, but I also say it's kind of a freaking pipe dream. I think we need to see with spiritual bifocals. Fortunately, I do not have bifocals yet, but I probably need them. The one lens helps you to see the harsh reality of the world, and the other lens helps you to see a world as God envisions it, as God breaks into the world. And that, to me, is even a more important question, is God breaking into our world. How is God breaking into your world and my world, our worlds, into our earth and our universe and the universes beyond? And that's exactly what Isaiah says. So into this brokenness, there is a child that is born, a son, a daughter, and upon him rests equity and justice and authority. And this child is not abusive with his or her authority. This child is not an authority grabber or a power-hungry monster. This child can share authority and share power and share peace and promote justice. This is the name of this child leader. Extraordinary strategist. I love that translation. We could use an extraordinary strategist right now in some house somewhere. Mighty God, everlasting parent, and Prince of Peace. Those are the words. Then they were read, the energy in the room changed. Would that not be an excellent platform for a politician? Maybe we wouldn't say mighty God, but mighty, good, divine human. What I find interesting, though, about Isaiah's prophecy here is that he prophesies, strangely enough, in the past tense. Oh, isn't that interesting? Because we always look at it in the future tense, that this mighty strategist, this extraordinary God, this everlasting parent, this Prince of Peace is yet to come. And if that's true, then for those of us who are love and justice-seeking people, we are the ones that are to usher in this reign of God, because we're all princes and princesses. That we are a part of this dominion and this journey to be just that, because we are star children. And I don't know how many different ways I can say this during the Advent season. That you are a princess, that I am a prince, and sometimes a princess. We are the ones that we have been waiting for. Or the longer and more in-depth version by our ex-President Barack Obama, change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. 9/11, that's when Homeland Security Department began. created 11 days after 9/11 to what? Protect us, to maintain peace, and to create, I think, a culture of heightened fear. And every time that bus pulls up to our church and drops off our guests, I have a few choice words that I generally do not speak out loud. Except if Laura Alarda was here, I did speak them out loud to her this past Thursday. And in the age of terror and fear in which we are living, it is really difficult and challenging to be a person of faith. This is potentially our time of darkness, our time of fear, but Isaiah poses the question again and again and again, generation after generation, war after war, an act of terror. He says, will we make room for the Prince of Peace? Will we make room for the Prince of Peace? How full are our inns? Will we prepare to follow him in our peacemaking? And all over this wonderful Christmas story, we hear these words, peace on earth, goodwill to men, and to women, and to everyone. I am so done with listening to stories that stoke fear on Fox and CNN, on the internet. All the war making in the world, all the war making that creates in my old soul. And today I want to make a commitment to really attempt to live Christmas all year. That Christmas would come for all of us in 2019 when we have a year of peace and fear is dispelled, even if it's just in our space on Sunday mornings. Because we are all star children. We are all prince and princesses. And we actually are all change makers. And we can live without fear. We can be makers of peace. We can offer peace and we can offer forgiveness and mercy. And the question I have is, will you join me and will you be a dreamer? And that would have been the best song to end on, but guess what? It wasn't the one we chose a few days ago. Because we can see light at the end of the tunnel. We can see light at the end of the tunnel, and I love this next slide. Due to recent budget cuts, the light at the end of the tunnel has been turned off. Well, guess what? I'm not going to let that happen. Not in my life, not in my lifetime. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. That's what Isaiah promises, and that's what God promises. The light at the end of the tunnel is not an illusion, but the tunnel is an illusion because the light is there. As I think back on our year as a community, oh my goodness, we've done an awful lot. I think of the new star child in our midst that I talked about last week. As Katie ponders, what are Eloise's possibilities? What potential does she have for this world? And I would like you to ask yourself that question of you. In your context and in your place, and in your home, and in your church, and in your place of employment, or in your retirement, or in your school, wherever you are, what are your possibilities? What are your potential? What is your potential to be peace, to bring hope? We are the ones ultimately that we've been waiting for. Will we change the world? To be honest, probably not. My roommate actually challenged me to say that today. We probably won't change the world because Jesus does say, and I kind of believe some of the words of Jesus most of the time. He says, we're going to have wars and rumors of war. And people are going to say peace, 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 but there isn't going to really be any peace. So how do we create that peace within and that peace in our own worlds and context? It's just kind of like we did with the refugees, with our guests, with those seeking asylum. It's bit by bit, person by person, refugee by refugee, child by child. Each act of loving kindness, each plate of food that is offered, each smile, each door that is opened so someone can go through first, changes that moment in time. It changes that moment in time. Here are my closing words for you today. from a wonderful Russian writer. If we wait for the moment when everything, absolutely everything is ready, we shall never begin. That reminds me of Isaiah. That reminds me of Jesus. That reminds me of, real life. If we wait for the moment when everything, absolutely everything is ready, we shall never begin. Please be in a moment of prayer.